What would you do if your husband found out you had betrayed him with the very people he trusted most? I thought humiliating him by testing his friends would prove he was replaceable. Instead, he collected evidence, walked into court, and left me blocked everywhere, while I watched him take back control of his life. My name is Leora Penn. I'm 33, and people say I ruined my own life, but I don't see it that way. I always told myself I was just testing who really cared about me, who could handle me at my worst. Nathan, my husband, was steady, safe, boring. He never raised his voice, never made a scene, just came home from teaching every day and slipped into the same routine. To me, that wasn't love. It was a cage. So I made my own test. I started spending time with his friends, telling myself it was harmless, that I deserved to feel wanted. One drink here, one late night there, and soon I convinced myself I had every right to compare. I told Serena, my sister, that I was simply finding out who truly fit me. She laughed and called me brave. Ruth, my mother-in-law, called me reckless and cruel. But I told everyone the same thing. Nathan should thank me for choosing him, even if his own friends made me feel more alive. Back then, I thought I was the one in control. What I didn't see was Nathan watching silently, gathering every piece of proof he needed, waiting for the moment to strike back. The first time things cracked wide open was at Nathan's parents' house. Ruth and David loved hosting Sunday dinners, and we'd been doing them since before I even married into the family. Their dining room always smelled of roasted herbs and bread, and the table was set neatly with candles. On the surface, it looked like comfort, tradition, family. But for me, it always felt like a performance where I had to sit still and pretend the quiet life was enough. That night started the same way as all the others. Nathan sat beside me, calm and steady, answering his father's questions about work with that same even voice. He talked about his students, about grading papers, about how he wanted to take the kids to the museum over spring break. It wasn't bad. It wasn't wrong. But as I listened, I felt myself suffocating. 7 years of the same quiet man with the same routine. My sister Serena had been teasing me for weeks, telling me I needed excitement, that I was wasting my youth in a life built on schedules and predictability. She told me any of Nathan's friends would fight harder to keep me happy. Her words had stuck, so when Ruth turned to me and asked how I was doing, I didn't smile politely the way I usually did. I sighed, loud enough for everyone to hear, and said, life was fine but dull. I said at least Nathan's friends knew how to keep a conversation alive. I dropped Tom's name specifically, saying he had such a lively way of telling stories, unlike Nathan, who only ever talked about grading papers. The table went silent. Ruth's fork froze in her hand. She stared at me with narrowed eyes, as though she couldn't believe what she had just heard. David cleared his throat, trying to smooth things over, but Ruth wasn't letting it pass. She said I was humiliating her son in his own parents' house. Nathan didn't respond. He cut another piece of chicken and chewed quietly, as if none of it touched him. That silence made me bold. I smirked and said I was only joking, that Nathan needed to lighten up. I told them he should be grateful I chose him in the first place, because there were plenty of men who would have treated me better, made me feel more alive. Serena, who had come along that evening, laughed and backed me up. She said not everyone was built to live in silence, that I deserved energy, not just duty. Ruth's face flushed red. She told me I didn't understand what stability meant, that I was mocking a man who gave me a home, children, and loyalty. I leaned back and said stability was just another word for boredom, and maybe if Nathan had more spark, I wouldn't need to make jokes. Serena clapped her hands at that, proud of me. The children, Lily and Ben, were picking at their food, confused by the tension. Lily asked why Grandma sounded mad. I told her nothing was wrong, that Mommy was just teasing Daddy, but Ruth cut in sharply and said children notice more than I realized. The room grew thick, the only sound the clink of David's fork against his plate. After dinner, when everyone was clearing dishes, Ruth pulled Nathan aside. She hugged him tightly, whispering in his ear. He nodded once, still calm, still silent. David patted his shoulder, a gesture of support that stung me. No one offered me comfort. Serena rolled her eyes, muttering that the family was overreacting. We drove home in silence. Nathan kept both hands on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the road. I told him he was sulking, that I couldn't even joke without him acting like the world was ending. He said nothing. His quiet made me angrier. I accused him of being detached, of letting everyone else's opinions matter more than his wife's. He still didn't respond. When we got home, the kids ran upstairs, and Nathan went to tuck them in. I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through my phone. That was when I saw it. A message from Eric, one of Nathan's closest friends. "You looked stunning tonight. Wish we had more time to talk." My lips curled into a smile before I even thought about it. I put the phone face down when Nathan came back downstairs. He glanced at me, his eyes flicking to the glass of wine, then to the phone, then back to my face. He didn't ask. He didn't accuse. He just walked past me into the living room and sat down with a book. That silence felt unbearable. I wanted him to demand answers, to shout, to prove he cared. Instead, he gave me nothing, and in that nothing, I felt both powerful and uneasy. Serena's words echoed in my head, that I deserved someone who would fight for me, someone who would notice me. I told myself Nathan's silence was weakness. What I didn't realize was that it was calculation. Later that night, when I checked my phone again, I had another message, this time from Julian, another of Nathan's friends. "We should grab drinks sometime, just us." I laughed to myself, a sharp little sound in the quiet house. Nathan was in bed already, his steady breathing drifting down the hall. I told myself this was proof. If his friends could see me, notice me, want me, then maybe I had been right all along. Nathan wasn't enough. But when I caught him watching me the next morning, his expression unreadable, a chill crept over me. He kissed the kids goodbye, picked up his bag, and left for work without a word. For the first time, I wondered if that silence wasn't weakness at all. Maybe it was him keeping score. The second crack happened not in a private fight, but in front of everyone Nathan cared about. His friends had invited us out to a bar one Friday night, the kind of casual get-together where pitchers of beer sat in the middle of the table and laughter filled the air. I had dressed to stand out, a short skirt and a blouse that clung in the right places. Nathan had just worn his usual, dark jeans, a button-up shirt, neat but unremarkable. Standing next to him, I felt like fire next to a shadow. From the moment we walked in, I noticed the looks. Tom was the first to smile at me, leaning in to tell me I looked incredible. I laughed, tossing my hair, making sure Nathan saw. Eric joined in too, offering to buy me a drink before Nathan could. I accepted, sipping slowly, watching my husband out of the corner of my eye. He said nothing, just sipped his beer and listened to Julian tell some story about work. That silence infuriated me. I wanted him to react, to make a scene, to pull me back into line. Instead, he left me free to flirt, so I pushed harder. When Tom joked about Nathan's love of books, I laughed too loudly and said he could talk about novels for hours, but couldn't hold a conversation about real life. A few people laughed, but the humor didn't land. Nathan looked down at his glass. Eric leaned over and whispered that Nathan was lucky, that a woman like me deserved someone who noticed her. I smiled, leaning in closer than I should have. Nathan glanced up, his eyes flicking to us, then back to the table. He didn't say a word. I twisted that silence into a weapon. When we were ordering food, I told the group I loved how spontaneous Nathan's friends were, unlike my husband, who thought adventure meant taking the kids to the park. A strained chuckle went around the table. Tom looked uncomfortable. Julian shifted in his seat, but I kept smiling. I told myself this was proof. Nathan wasn't enough, and everyone could see it. The evening dragged on. Nathan hardly spoke, only answering questions when asked. I kept the attention on me, laughing at every joke, touching Tom's arm when he said something clever, leaning toward Eric when he whispered another compliment. I told myself I was just showing Nathan what he was missing. But when I excused myself to go to the bathroom, I overheard Grace's voice in my head. She had warned me before that humiliating Nathan would only backfire. I shook it off, reminding myself Grace never understood me. Serena did. Serena said I deserved to be worshipped, that Nathan's friends were proof he wasn't doing enough. When I returned, Nathan was gone. His half-finished beer sat on the table, the condensation dripping down the glass. I asked where he went, and Julian said quietly that he had left. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. I laughed it off, telling the group he was being dramatic, but my stomach twisted. I finished my drink and kept the conversation going, pretending not to care. When I got home later, the house was quiet. Nathan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look at me when I walked in. I asked why he left so suddenly. He said he had papers to grade. I accused him of sulking, of being jealous. He said nothing, just kept scrolling. That silence again, heavy as stone. The next morning, as I walked to my car, I noticed him standing near the driveway with his phone raised. He was pointing it across the street, toward where Tom's car had been parked the night before. He lowered the phone when he saw me, slid it into his pocket, and walked inside without a word. I felt a chill. For the first time, I wondered if Nathan wasn't ignoring me at all. Maybe he was collecting pieces, bit by bit, building something I couldn't yet see. Later that day, Serena called. I told her Nathan was being ridiculous, acting cold and distant. She laughed and said he was just weak, that I should lean harder into the attention from his friends. She told me to remind him how easily I could be taken. I smiled at her words, repeating them to myself like armor. But that night, when Nathan kissed the kids goodnight and shut our bedroom door without a glance at me, I couldn't shake the feeling that his silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy, and I had no idea what game he was playing. By the time gossip started creeping into my workplace, I was already too deep to stop. I worked at a call center, rows of cubicles filled with people who loved nothing more than to whisper about someone else's drama. Daniel's name hadn't come up yet, but Tom's had, and Eric's too. Someone had seen me at a cafe with Eric, sitting too close in a booth, laughing too much. By the end of the week, Ellen from accounting asked if Nathan knew how much time I spent with his friends. I rolled my eyes and told her Nathan never noticed anything. I said he was too focused on his students, too busy grading papers to even see me. She frowned, muttered something about how some women didn't know what they had, and walked away. Her words stung, but I shoved them aside. Serena told me not to care what people thought. She said if Nathan wasn't stepping up, then I was right to look elsewhere. She called it field testing, like I was smart for comparing who treated me best. I liked the sound of that. It made me feel less reckless and more in control, so I kept going. I met Eric again, this time at a bar just outside town. He said Nathan never appreciated me, that he'd noticed me for years. I leaned in, letting him think I believed every word. I told myself Nathan deserved this, that if he wasn't man enough to fight for me, then I was free to see who else would. When I left the bar that night, Eric kissed me by my car. I laughed, brushing it off as part of the test, but as I drove home, headlights followed me longer than they should have. When I glanced in the mirror, I saw Nathan's car a few lengths back. My heart skipped. He didn't tail me all the way, but I knew it was him. He had seen. At home, he was already there, tucked in with the kids. He acted as if nothing had happened. I wanted him to accuse me, to yell, to prove he cared. Instead, he helped Lily with her bedtime story, kissed Ben goodnight, and went to his desk to grade papers. I accused him of spying, but he only looked at me with those steady eyes and said nothing. That silence gnawed at me. The next week, rumors spread faster. At work, people whispered when I walked past. One coworker asked outright if Nathan knew about Tom. I told her it was none of her business, that I was just living my life. She gave me a pitying look I couldn't stand. Grace called the same evening. Her voice was sharp, almost shaking. She said she wouldn't babysit anymore if I kept parading Nathan's friends around town. She said I was breaking the family apart. I snapped back that she didn't understand, That passion mattered more than her outdated ideas of loyalty. She hung up on me. Even my own mother tried to intervene. She said quietly that Jonah and Ben needed stability, that kids didn't understand tests or experiments. I told her she had stayed in a boring marriage too long and wanted me trapped like she had been. She went silent and I slammed the phone down, shaking with anger. But beneath the anger was something else, fear, because everywhere I went I felt Nathan's eyes on me. Once, leaving Serena's apartment late at night, I saw him parked down the street, phone in hand. He didn't confront me. He just lifted the phone, snapped a picture, and drove off. I told Serena about it, trying to laugh, but my voice cracked. She told me not to be scared, that Nathan was just bluffing. But I knew him better than she did. He wasn't bluffing, he was collecting. At home, Nathan never raised his voice, never slammed a door. He played with the kids, graded his papers, paid the bills. But the way he looked at me had changed. There was no begging, no pleading, just a quiet, steady focus that chilled me. One night I came into the kitchen and found him at the table, a neat stack of papers beside him. He closed the folder when I walked in, slid it into his bag, and wished me good night. I wanted to snatch it from him, to see what he was hiding, but I didn't. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and told myself he was powerless. Still, when I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the image of him snapping photos, building a file, and for the first time, I wondered if I had gone too far. Not because I felt guilty, but because maybe Nathan wasn't the weak one after all. Maybe he was waiting for the perfect moment to show me just how wrong I had been. The fourth crack came at our own house, when Nathan agreed to host his friends for a small get-together. I should have been on my best behavior, but by then I had convinced myself I was untouchable. Serena had been in my ear again, telling me I should stop hiding, that flaunting my freedom would prove Nathan couldn't control me. So I planned the evening like it was my stage. Every detail meant to show how desirable I was, even surrounded by his oldest friends. The night started normally enough. The guys came in carrying six-packs and snacks, greeting Nathan with pats on the back. He smiled faintly, polite but distant, while I floated around offering drinks. I wore a dress that caught every eye. Tom avoided looking directly at me. Eric smiled too long, and Julian kept his gaze down. They all knew, and I liked that. Dinner was casual, pizza and chips, music low in the background. At first the conversation was about work, about the kids' soccer games, about the weather. Nathan sat at the head of the table, calm, saying little. I decided to push. I leaned in and said loudly that sometimes I wondered how I ended up with the quiet one when his friends were so much more fun. A strained laugh went around, but mostly silence. I pressed harder, joking that Tom told better stories, that Eric noticed details Nathan never did, that Julian actually laughed at my jokes. The air froze. Nathan looked at me, steady, unblinking. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. That silence cut deeper than shouting would have. I filled it quickly, saying he should be grateful I hadn't left already, that I could have chosen any one of his friends. Serena, who had tagged along, cackled and said I was right, that Nathan had never known how to fight for me. That was when Ruth's warning echoed in my mind. I brushed it off, lifting my glass like I had won, but Nathan's friends wouldn't meet my eyes. Their laughter was hollow, their bodies stiff. Even they were ashamed of me. Lily wandered in then, asking if she could have another cookie. Nathan rose, handed her one, and kissed her head. He didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone else. Just calm, controlled, like none of this was surprising to him. I snapped, accusing him of being spineless, of letting me humiliate him without lifting a finger. I said Daniel, though I shouldn't have, would at least fight for me. The room went silent. Tom set his drink down. Eric cleared his throat. Julian shook his head. Serena tried to laugh it off, saying I was just being honest. Nathan didn't move. He walked to the counter, picked up a thick envelope, and placed it on the table in front of me. His voice was flat when he said I could open it later. Then he turned and left the room, heading upstairs without another word. I stared at the envelope, heat rising in my chest. Everyone else avoided looking at me. Serena whispered that he was bluffing, that I shouldn't be scared. But for the first time, my hands shook. After the guests left, the house was painfully quiet. The kids were asleep. Nathan's door shut tight. I poured myself another drink and paced the kitchen, the envelope sitting like a weight on the table. I told myself it was just a dramatic gesture, another attempt at control. I even laughed, calling him pathetic. But deep down, I felt the truth pressing in. That silence of his wasn't surrender, it was preparation. And whatever was inside that envelope was going to change everything. The next morning, with the house quiet and Nathan gone to work, I finally tore open the envelope. My heart raced, expecting maybe a letter, an ultimatum, or some kind of emotional plea. But it wasn't that. It was paperwork, thick, official, stamped with a law officer's name, custody petitions, financial protection filings. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page. He had already been to a lawyer. He wasn't bluffing. I slammed the papers on the counter, telling myself it was a scare tactic. He couldn't possibly go through with it. But when I tried to use my debit card later that morning, it declined. I swiped again, certain it was a mistake, but the cashier only gave me that awkward, pitying smile. People in line shifted uncomfortably. I left my groceries behind and hurried out, face burning. In the car, I checked my account balance, empty. Nathan had already frozen the joint accounts. Panic set in. I called him over and over, but he didn't answer. I left voicemails accusing him of cruelty, of ruining the kids' lives. Still nothing. I texted him, "You can't just cut me off. You're destroying us." Silence. Serena was the first person I called for comfort. She laughed and told me not to worry, that Nathan was trying to scare me. She said I should push harder, lean into Eric or Tom, prove I didn't need Nathan at all. But when I called Eric, his tone had changed. He said this had gone too far, that he didn't want to be dragged into legal trouble. When I asked for help covering a bill, he muttered that he couldn't. Tom didn't answer at all. Julian texted once, saying he wanted nothing to do with it. My so-called options were vanishing one by one. That evening, Nathan came home as if nothing had happened. He kissed Lily and Ben, asked about their day, helped them with homework. He didn't look at me until they were upstairs. Then I cornered him in the kitchen, slamming the envelope on the counter. I demanded answers. He looked at me calmly, the way he always did, and said he wasn't punishing me. He was protecting the children. I snapped that Daniel and the others were just friends, that people were twisting things. He didn't raise his voice. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and showed me photo after photo. Me with Eric at the cafe, me laughing too close to Tom at the bar, Julian's car outside the house. He swiped through them slowly, each one time-stamped. My stomach dropped. I accused him of stalking me, of twisting harmless moments. He shook his head and said it wasn't just photos. He had messages too, screenshots of texts where I had called him boring, where I'd told Serena I was field testing his friends, where I joked that maybe one of them would be a better father. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. I tried to laugh, saying he was being dramatic, but my voice cracked. He didn't flinch. He said the court would see the truth, that he had already spoken to his lawyer about custody and financial protection. Then he walked upstairs, leaving me trembling in the kitchen. That night, Ruth called. She said she was proud of her son for finally standing up for himself. She told me I'd pushed too far, that I had humiliated Nathan in front of everyone, and now it was time for consequences. I hung up on her, but her words rang in my ears. Later, my own mother called. She sounded tired, her voice softer than usual. She said she couldn't defend me anymore, not after everything I had done. She reminded me that Lily and Ben needed stability, not drama. I snapped that she was choosing Nathan over me. She sighed and said maybe this time Nathan was the one making the right choice. I sat in the dark kitchen, the envelope spread open on the counter, my phone buzzing with unanswered calls. For years, I had told myself Nathan's silence meant weakness. Now I saw it differently. That silence was a shield, and behind it, He had been building something stronger than I ever imagined, and now he was ready to use it. The courthouse was colder than I expected, all polished floors and echoing footsteps. I walked in with my head high, telling myself Nathan was bluffing, that the judge would see through his little performance. I wore my best dress, hair perfect, makeup flawless. I told myself if I looked strong, I could still control the story. But the moment I stepped inside and saw Nathan sitting at the table with his lawyer, calm and collected, my stomach sank. He looked like a man who had already won. The mediator opened the file, sliding copies across the table. Evidence. That word made my chest tighten. There were photos, me with Eric at the cafe, me leaning too close to Tom at the bar, Julian's car parked outside our house. Each one printed, dated, time-stamped. I wanted to say they were innocent moments, but even I didn't believe it anymore. Then came the text logs, my own words in black and white, calling Nathan boring, telling Serena I was testing his friends, even that awful joke about maybe one of them being a better father. My throat closed as the lawyer read them aloud. I tried to argue, saying these were private jokes, taken out of context. Nathan's lawyer shook his head. He said this wasn't about marriage, it was about stability for Lily and Ben. He pointed out the money transfers from our joint account, the payments labeled rent and studio fees. He said Nathan had documented everything, every withdrawal, every transfer, every time I covered someone else's bills. My hands trembled. I accused Nathan of being spiteful, of trying to ruin me. For the first time in weeks, he finally spoke. His voice was steady, calm. He said this wasn't about revenge. It was about giving our children a home free from chaos. He said they deserved a parent who put them first, not someone running around with his friends. His words cut deeper than shouting ever could. I looked around the room. Ruth sat behind him, her eyes hard but proud. David sat beside her, nodding. On my side, Serena scrolled on her phone, glaring at Nathan whenever she looked up. My parents sat silently, my mother's face pale, my father staring at the floor. No one defended me. No one. The ruling came faster than I imagined. Nathan was granted majority custody. I would have visitation rights, scheduled and supervised at first. Spousal support? Denied. The judge said financial misconduct disqualified me from claiming dependents. My access to household funds was stripped, limited only to expenses for the children under Nathan's oversight. The words rang in my ears like a sentence. Majority custody. Denied. Stripped. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. I told the judge Nathan was turning everyone against me, that his friends had wanted me too, that it wasn't all my fault. The judge's face didn't change. When the session ended, Nathan stood, gathering his papers neatly. He didn't look at me. He walked past, his children waiting outside with Ruth and David. Lily ran to him, hugging his leg. Ben reached for his hand. Nathan took both of them, steady and sure, walking out of the building without a word. I sat on the bench, frozen. My phone buzzed in my bag. My heart leapt. Maybe Eric, maybe Tom, maybe someone would choose me. I opened the message. It was from Eric. Don't contact me again. This is too much. Short. Final. The room emptied, leaving me alone with my papers and my silence. For years, I had mistaken Nathan's quiet for weakness, but that silence had been his weapon, his preparation. He hadn't needed to shout, hadn't needed to beg. He had simply waited, gathered proof, and let the law speak for him. Now he had the children, the finances, the respect. And me, I was left with nothing but the echo of my own choices, realizing too late that I had tested the wrong man. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.